And again, I'm just waiting for the 20-second mark for the live stream to start. Hey everyone, hey Wellness Crew, sorry about that. Welcome back to a reading of the Gene Keys Golden Path Love, a guide to your Venus sequence. The last live stream was interrupted by a phone call. I do apologize. I'm getting it back on track. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and or join one of the membership tiers as it is popping off. EQ and the cycle of puberty. The sphere of your EQ represents your emotional quotient, the measure of your emotional intelligence. It is relatively rare to find a human being who has a mature emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has to do with three main things: our ability to listen, our ability to communicate clearly, and our willingness to take responsibility for our own feelings. The challenge of the pathway of intelligence is a juggling act between our IQ and our EQ, both of which are vital components of a well-rounded intelligence. Your EQ is imprinted during your second 7-year cycle between the ages of 8 and 14. This phase of our childhood is the mid-ground between being a young child and becoming a young adult. Because this phase is in the middle of our childhood development, in many ways it is one of our greatest transitions in life. From approximately the age of 11 or 12, most children enter into puberty. This is an intense period of chemical transition as new hormones are being released into the body. Our DNA is pre-coded to release these life-changing substances into our bloodstream as part of the awakening of our duality. During this phase of our young lives, it seems that everything about us is changing. As a parent, you will watch your child at this stage accelerate away from their early innocence with a mixture of wonder, fascination, and perhaps a touch of sadness. Crossing the Rubicon. One of the most well-rounded, sensitive, and holistic approaches to childhood education and development is the Steiner-Waldorf model. Conceived by the Austrian mystic Rudolf Steiner, this approach considers the child from the deepest of angles. Steiner speaks of the 3 7-year stages from birth to 21 as an ongoing process of incarnation in which the subtle bodies of the child are still literally coming into form. As in the Gene Keys view, the second stage of development from 8 to 14 years also corresponds to the emotional development of the child. The beauty of the Steiner approach is that it has been tried and tested for over a century in thousands of schools around the globe. Steiner teachers over the years have noted a powerful pattern occurring in children at around the age of 9 years. This stage is known as crossing the Rubicon, which is a metaphor for a journey with no return. Corresponding with the loss of the child's milk teeth at around this age, the Rubicon represents the final transition from an experience of oneness with the world to the early development of the ego, or the sense of I. Children at around this time begin to test their teachers' and parents' boundaries in a powerful new way. In another sense, you could say that this is the child's final shaking off of the vestiges of Eden, as their consciousness begins to view the world from the perspective of a separate individual. This extraordinary phase in our development is usually profoundly misunderstood by our parents and peers, who through no fault of their own are probably ignorant of what is really occurring. Were our teachers and parents aware of the momentous relevance of this time in our psychic and emotional development, they would probably treat it very differently, with reverence and compassion, as opposed to discipline and harshness. Indeed, most of modern education has no notion of the subtle development of the child. The adult view itself has little memory of life before the Rubicon. The Steiner approach has also noted another further transition connected to the Rubicon occurring at the later age of around 11 years. This is another period of transition in which children are seen to push hard against the edges of their conditioning. Steiner saw this as the beginnings of their fuller mental development stage, when the intellect first begins to lead the sense of I within the child. In such models of early development, it is wise not to be too prescriptive, as some children develop early and others later. The 7-year cycles do not need to be interpreted literally, but are intended as a broad guide. What you can see about this mid-phase of development is its huge relevance in the inner life of the child. Your EQ in relationships, the boundary issue. One of the gauges of emotional maturity is a clear awareness of emotional boundaries. If your parents or peers did not imbue you with clear boundaries during your second 7-year cycle, then this will emerge as a pattern later in life. Your EQ and its gene key and line may well give you further clues about potential boundary issues you experience in your relationships. The issue of boundaries is always a delicate balance. If you are too heavy-handed in dealing with a child in this phase, then they will rebel. Thank you so much for the like, either externally or internally, against being overly disciplined. No child wants to feel their wings clipped. Alternatively, if you do not apply firm enough boundaries, but overindulge a child's needs and wishes, you will doubtless pay a price for this in their later teenage cycle of development. The second phase of our development lays the groundwork for our equally challenging teenage cycle. In later life, we often fall to either side of a balanced sense of emotional boundaries. We may tend towards overexpressiveness of our emotions, which can lead to all kinds of confusion in our relationships. On the other hand, we may be excessively guarded in our emotions because of an excess of harshness we received as a child. Almost all emotional issues are rooted in the second phase of our childhood development, so it can be very revealing to go back in time and consider what kind of boundaries you experienced from your parents and teachers at this time. Were your parents expressive of their own emotions? What were the quality and frequency of those emotions? Did they fight in front of you? Did they show love to each other and to you, and in what way? It is important to overcome the tendency to want to blame our parents for our later emotional tendencies. They were doing the best they could with the tools they were given by their parents. The question is then, can we break the pattern of blame and resentment that may follow us into our own relationships? To do this, we need to be well acquainted with our own patterns and take full responsibility for them. Cherishing your primary relationship, emotional love affairs. One of the common signs of a lack of boundaries in our primary relationship is the tendency to give our love appropriately to people outside the relationship. Often we strike up a friendship, usually a member of the opposite, where the feeling of love seems to flow more freely than in our own relationship. Dealing with this scenario with sensitivity is a hallmark of a healthy EQ. In our culture, there is very little awareness of the whole concept of the emotional love affair. Perhaps we feel that we should be able to express love to others without our partner becoming jealous. Certainly, this is true on one level, but the problems occur when we choose not to consider the feelings of our primary partner just because they may not be present. There is often general consensus that as long as we don't engage in any physical act of love, then everything else is allowed. This is clearly the mindset of a person who does not fully cherish their primary relationship. Our primary relationship needs to be given center stage in our life. If it is not, then it will inevitably wither. This is a universal truth. There is no point in being half-hearted when it comes to relationships. If you truly love someone, then you will love them enough to weather the storms that your karma throws up. If you enter into another relationship at an emotional level that in any way rivals your primary relationship, then trouble will follow sooner or later. It takes great maturity to love another person with appropriate boundaries and continue to honor your primary relationship. Honesty is paramount here. The simple rule to ask yourself is this: if my partner were here now, how would he or she feel about this? Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. Thanks. This consideration is part of the way you cherish your primary relationship. If this brings up issues of resentment inside you, then you must own those issues and dig deeper into their source. Most of the time, when we offer our love inappropriately to another outside of our primary relationship, it is because we are projecting that our partner is not meeting our needs in some way. This is a golden opportunity if you use it wisely. It is not the role of your partner to meet all your emotional needs. This is precisely what the developing child learns in the second cycle, that they have an independent emotional life that is no longer exclusively tied to their parent, and particularly to their mother. Emotional maturity means that you can express your emotional needs, but without pressure or blame. It takes a real intelligence to be able to walk this line between expressing your inner emotional life and simply realizing that there are things that are better left unsaid. Contemplation and emotional alchemy. When you learn to cherish your partner and your relationship, then you will learn the art of leaving things unsaid. There are so many things that we feel are simply better transformed internally. There is a common misconception in our Western culture that suggests that all emotions are best simply expressed in the moment they emerge. This is again an issue of boundaries. We have been told since the advent of Freud that emotions that are not expressed can be damaging to us. To an extent, it is true that the repression of emotions and desires is indeed a dangerous thing. The more we try and battle a feeling, the more power we give it. There is, however, another path, the path of emotional alchemy. Many feelings can be allowed, accepted, and embraced internally. They can be shared if appropriate, but a great deal of our emotional life, particularly our emotional shadows, is best transformed internally. Again, another sign of a healthy EQ is enough consideration for others, not to lay all of our emotional issues at their feet. We have enough to deal with just with our own issues. How then do we achieve this internal alchemy? When we train the lens of contemplation on the sphere of our EQ, it naturally transforms into a deeper kind of emotional awareness. Emotional contemplation involves being with our feelings in a new and powerful way. We make the commitment to draw our intense feelings inward without in any way repressing them. In a nutshell, we allow them time inside us. So many arguments and conflicts erupt in relationships because we indulge our feelings in the moment that they occur. This is a challenging habit to break. Emotional contemplation can help us break this habit by simply retaining the feelings, impulses, and words in a holding bay inside us. If we give them a little more time, many emotions simply dissolve or transform all on their own. Keeping it in the porch, an emotional commitment while traveling the golden path. In the UK, many houses have a small external room or covering built over the front door. Known as the porch, this serves as a transitionary area where coats and boots are often taken off and hung up before we enter into the house fully. As you learn the art of emotional contemplation, you can make an inner commitment to yourself regarding this new way of handling your emotions in relationships. This is the second major technique of the Venus sequence. we learn to keep our emotions in the porch. Instead of simply allowing the stream of our emotions to come pouring out without any awareness, we give them a moment of pause. Keeping our feelings in the porch does not mean that we hold back from expressing ourselves. It simply means that we acknowledge that some things are better unsaid, and we need time to see what, if anything, does need to be said. If we have held our feelings in the metaphorical porch for a while and they still want to come out, then that is also okay. But the chances are they will emerge in a different, more considered and diplomatic way. This technique of simply holding on to our low frequency emotions for a while, instead of blurting them out, is so simple that most people have never considered it. It is, however, the basis of emotional alchemy. You may have realized by now that contemplation demands a slow and easy rhythm. And this is particularly the case when we are dealing with emotions. Emotions are dynamic, and as their name suggests, they are energy in motion. If you hold back some of that pressure, it can move through a transformation onto a higher plane. The upside of your EQ, defense or dance. As you employ these simple techniques and insights, you will soon see what a hub of transformation the sphere of your EQ really is. It is the first place where the sacred wound emerges onto the emotional/astral plane. This means that there is an enormous charge in this sphere. As you bring deeper awareness into the patterns of this gene key in your life, you will find that two things happen. The first is that you will begin to drop your defenses in relationships. Dropping your defenses is not the same as dropping your boundaries. Whenever we feel emotionally threatened, we contract into a defensive pattern that we learned in our childhood. By slowing down the intensity of our emotional life, we take the sting out of this pattern. The second thing that occurs as we transform these emotional shadow patterns internally is that we feel a new buoyancy inside. Figuratively speaking, we begin to want to dance. The upside of our EQ is that we rekindle a lost part of our childhood, our love of play. The very energy that goes into defending ourselves from the perceived threats of others is released into our life as a spirit of playfulness. When the gene key of your EQ is positively released at a higher frequency, this quality emerges in a very playful manner. All the joys of our childhood remain inside our DNA throughout our lives as stored potential delight. If our childhood wounding patterns can persist into adulthood, it makes sense that our childhood wonders can also persist. This is the reward of achieving a balanced EQ. We no longer need to look outside ourselves to have our emotional needs met, because our joyousness keeps welling up from within. From this place, we are able for the first time in a long, long time to live in a relationship in a truly healthy way. The shadow. The shadow and line of the gene key in the sphere of your EQ will consistently undermine your core stability. This is an emotional pattern, so even if the gene key you have here has a strong mental bias, it will be in conjunction with your emotional makeup. A lack of emotional intelligence often manifests as a tendency to get caught up in blaming others. We blame others for our condition because we are unable or unwilling to take full responsibility for it. In most cases, we are not even aware of our emotional shadow patterns, but have simply become accustomed to indulging in them. The shadow of your EQ often has to do with the indulgence of the low frequency state. It is a sad fact that we often save our worst behavior for those we claim to love the most. As we have seen, an important aspect of having a high EQ is consideration for those we love. Instead of indulging in our negativity just because we can, We either sublimate it into something creative, or we draw it inside and allow it to be transformed. Look deeply into the shadow of your EQ, and you will find its roots going back to your second childhood cycle. Then move into a deep contemplative process with this pattern until you have seen how and when it emerges in your life. Under what conditions do you forget to be kind to those you love? Once you have got to the bottom of this pattern, you will find it much easier to transform. The gift. The gifts of your EQ are manifold and wonderful. This is about bringing the best of your childhood alive again. We all need to play in life. Life can be hard and serious at times, but it can also be filled with wonder and delight. As you learn to transcend and transform the victim patterns of the shadow of your EQ, you will give birth to the eternal spirit of the inner child once again. Look into the gift of the gene key of your EQ and consider how much joy and fun you could spread through a full expression of this gift and its line. There are places within our psyche where we are simply never supposed to grow up. On contemplating this gift, you might like to consider the dreams and gifts you had as a child passing through this mid-cycle of your childhood. Thank you so much for the like. What are your happiest, most golden memories of that time? You can breathe in the essence of those memories and then find a way to integrate them once again in your current life. We have already seen the hallmarks of a healthy EQ, a strong sense of emotional accountability, the ability to consider the feelings of others at all times, the dropping of our defensiveness, and the ability to retain clear emotional boundaries. All of these are the qualities of a mature emotional adult. However, the final flowering of your EQ is always about reveling in your innocence, in the simple joys of life, and in your ability to think, act, and play like a child once again. The city. The city of your EQ concerns the transmutation of low-frequency emotional charge into a higher form of creativity. The clearer you become in your relationships, the more you cherish them, and the more devotional energy you will feel. Relationships and friendships are the true wonder of human life. Each relationship is an odyssey that offers us an opportunity for deep transformation. At their highest, your relationships can become the most direct path available in the modern world to an awareness of your inherent divinity. The cities represent the bringing in of our inner harvest. This usually comes after much inner work and through having undergone many trials. We all at some point move through a deep process of grieving over our relationships, either through a relationship that comes to an end or the death of a loved one. The city of your EQ is a constant reminder of the ray of light that always lies behind the emotional process of relating. At their highest frequencies, your emotions can be such beautiful, poetic reachings into the void. Emotion itself has to be burned up before we can move into those states of inner silence and transcendence. Therefore, as we come closer to such states, our emotions become so sweet and exquisite that they make our hearts ache for the beyond. Such states of devotion and bhakti always precede the final flowering of our hearts. Ponder deeply on the city of your EQ, for it holds the key to your emotional transcendence. You can go to thegenekeys.com and get your different spheres by just inputting a few simple pieces of information, like the time of your birth, the day of your birth, your first and last name, and your hometown, like the city of your birth, and it will actually break it down for you for free. And it's a really great opportunity to get to know more about the gene keys and more about how they can apply to you. Thank you so much for joining me on this live stream. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and or join as it is popping off on the membership tiers. I'll see you on the next video or live stream. Be well.